All right, everyone. So let's talk about what are going to be the best and worst stats when it comes to gearing up your champions. I'm going to talk about each stat and why it's important or maybe not as important. And then at the end, I'm going to mention some other really important notes about gearing up your champions. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the equipment section for the video today so I can explain some things in the actual stat menu. And let's start off with what is going to be the number one stat when it comes to gearing up pretty much all of your champions in Raid Shadow Legends. It's definitely known as the king of all stats. I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with what it is. That is, of course, going to be speed. Now, speed is important for a whole bunch of different reasons. There's a lot of misconceptions about what speed does and why it's important, or maybe why it's not important. And I'll tell you that the thing that speed does and why it is the king of all stats is because it determines how many turns your champions are going to take in retrospect compared to the amount of turns that other champions are going to take. Now, this applies to both your own champions and your own team, as well as your opponents. Now, just as a really easy example, if we take a champion that we have that has a speed of 200, and then we take an enemy champion that has a speed of 100, our champion with a speed of 200 is going to be taking 2 turns for every 1 turn that the enemy champion with a speed of 100 has. Now you can see that those are some pretty easy numbers to use as an example, but even when you use any numbers, the same thing applies. So a champion that has 101 speed is indeed going to be taking more turns than champions that have 100 speed. It's just going to be a lot less of a difference, and it's going to take a while for you to really kind of notice it. Now, that is obviously, of course, very important when it comes to the arena, because you're going to want to have at least one champion on your team go first. Really important. It doesn't have to be all your champions. You don't have to go absolutely crazy on the speed of all of your champions, but you definitely want to have one of them go first, which is why having a speed aura in the arena is so important, and why you will see so many people using speed aura champions, because once your one champion goes first, you block your opponent from being able to react and be able to do anything. They don't get to apply their debuffs or their buffs, or they don't get to apply counterattack, revives, all the crazy stuff that makes teams very difficult in order to beat. You get the first action, and then you are the one that gets to do all the buffs, debuffs, and crazy stuff before your team has a chance, or before your enemy's team has a chance in order to do so. So that's what speed is going to do, and you can see why, not just in the arena, but pretty much in all aspects of the game, you want your champions taking more turns, because the more turns they're taking in comparison to your opponent's turns, the more damage you're going to be able to do, the more often you're going to be able to use your skills, so you actually get more benefit by having more speed on skills that have cooldowns, because you're going to be able to activate them more frequently compared to how often your opponent is acting, and just overall, it is an incredibly powerful stat. So you'll definitely notice that as you build upon the speed of your champions, you're going to notice that just overall in all aspects of the game, especially the arena, but definitely in all aspects of the game, your champions and your team is going to get much, much stronger. So it is without a doubt going to be the number one priority when it comes to stats and gearing up your champions. This is another reason why the Dragon is probably the most frequently run endgame dungeon, is quite simply because of this speed artifact drop. Speed is so powerful that the speed artifact set is indeed going to be among the best, if not the best artifact sets, which is why so many endgame players spend so much time in the Dragon's Lair. So it is simple, it's not that complicated, it's only a 2-set piece, but it is still one of the most, if not the most important stats in Raid Shadow Legends by far. So that's going to be the king of all stats. Now we move into second place, and that is going to be crit chance. Now this is very important because these stats scale very, very well. And as we get into third place, which you guys will see in a second what the third most important stat is, you guys will see why crit chance is very important. Now the good news about crit chance is, as you get into the mid and late game stages of Raid Shadow Legends, you're going to notice that with the substats that you end up finding on gear, you're probably not going to be needing to use the crit damage set. This is more of a, I guess you could say, early game might not be the right description, but kind of a mid-game thing to have to use the critical rate set in order to get a bunch of extra crit for your champions. As you get to the late game and you start getting epics, legendaries, you start getting multiple rolls that have a ton of crit rate on your artifacts, you're going to notice that it shouldn't be too bad in order to accumulate getting up to 100%. Now, you're definitely going to want to get 100%, not just on certain champions, but you're going to want to get it on pretty much all your champions that are going to be dishing out a good amount of damage. Now, it's especially important on certain champions that have skills that benefit from crit chance, like Vrask, of course, and his Cannibalism passive, where he needs to crit in order to activate that skill. But you'll realize that it's still going to be a very important way in order to tremendously increase the damage of your champions. So very important. You're definitely going to want to get to as close to 100% crit rate as you can. And what that is going to do is that is going to make the next most important stat, which is actually going to end up being crit damage. It's going to make it even better. Now, you can see how crit chance and crit damage are directly tied to each other. The more crit chance you have, the more effect that you're going to end up getting from crit damage. Now, if you have a 50% chance to crit, well, then you're only getting half of the effect from crit damage as if you had a 100% chance to crit. Now, if you have a 100% chance to crit every single attack, you're going to be getting the full benefit from all the crit damage that you have. So the combination of these two stats, crit chance and crit damage, is going to give you a tremendous amount of power to all of your champions that are going to be dishing out damage. It's actually going to scale better in terms of the amount of damage that you do, better than the primary offensive type stat for that champion. Now, I'm not just talking about attack. Now, for Foley, of course, that would end up being attack, but for Sir Nicholas, that would end up being HP. Still going to be very important as we move into the next most important stats, but the combination of crit chance and crit damage is still overall going to be a better multiplier and a better way to boost your damage than just stacking a ton of, let's say, just ignoring crit chance completely, ignoring crit damage completely, and just deciding to try to stack a bunch of attack. You will still do more damage that way, but it's not going to be as effective. You're definitely going to be dishing out a lot more damage if you can find a way to gear up around building a good amount of crit damage, as close to 100% as possible, a lot of crit damage, so that when you have 100% crit chance, you're going to be getting the full effect from it, and then also adding in a good amount of whatever stat the champion is scaling off of. So for Foley, that would end up being attack. For Sir Nicholas, that would end up being HP, and so on and so forth. So number 2 and number 3 is going to be the combination of crit chance and also crit damage. Now we move into the next most important stat, and I briefly mentioned it, and that is going to be the primary stat that the champion scales off of. So it's not just going to be attack or HP or defense. It's going to depend on the actual champion that you are building. Now, this is very important, especially to those of you guys who are newer players. I definitely ended up making this mistake on some of my first champions, is make sure you actually take a look at the skills of the champions and see what stat these skills are scaling off of. Now, for attack-based champions, it's usually pretty simple. It's just going to be based off of attack, which means increasing your attack is going to obviously increase your damage, because not only does attack increase your damage, but the skills are based off of attack as well. So you'll probably notice that attack-based champions are pretty darn heavy hitters because of this. But on other champions, they're actually going to scale not just from attack, they're actually going to scale from another stat. So you can find, for example, HP-based champions, where if you take a look at the skills, they're actually going to scale from HP. Now, what this means is that when you add HP to that champion, not only are you going to be giving it more HP, you can see how beefy Sir Nicholas is with, what is that, almost 90,000 HP on the Sir Nicholas right now, but because of that really high HP and because his skills actually scale off of HP, he's going to actually increase his damage because of this. This is another reason why, generally speaking, defensive-based champions are going to be better than offensive-based champions as you approach the end game, is because not only are you going to be building a strong defense when you add, for example, HP to Sir Nicholas, or if you add defense to Raz and Scarhide, but you're also going to be increasing their offensive capabilities. So you're kind of able to build upon two things at once when it comes to gearing up. Whereas when it comes to an offensive-based attack champion, if I wanted to actually build this guy to be a bit more defensive, I could add defense or HP to his gear, but that's not going to increase his attack. It's only going to end up increasing his defenses. So when it comes to HP and defensive-based champions, you kind of, again, are able to knock out two birds with one stone, which makes them more viable in the end game. You have lots of damage, lots of beefiness, and they are, generally speaking, going to be a bit easier in order to gear up because you can kind of accomplish two goals at once. So definitely make sure that you pay attention to that. Very, very important. Now, overall, I would say out of the three, defense is probably the best, but it's definitely a close call between defense and HP. You could argue that HP might even be a little bit better because you have the Immortal set, which is a very, very good gear set that you can end up getting from the clan boss, which gives you HP and heals every turn. But again, generally speaking, defensive going to be a bit better than offensive when it comes to the end game type content in the game. So your champion scaling stat, no matter what that might be, that's going to be the next most important stat when it comes to gearing. Next up is going to be accuracy. Now, even though accuracy seems to be pretty far down this list, that doesn't mean that it's not important. The reason why it's this far down the list is because there's generally speaking going to be a lot other ways that you can end up getting accuracy on your champions besides very specifically trying to get it on your gear. You're probably going to first of all notice that you're just going to end up with some accuracy on your gear either way, whether you're trying to go for it or whether you're not. There's just so many different substats on gear. You're probably going to notice that some kind of accuracy ends up on your gear nonetheless. You can also end up getting an accuracy banner as well, which is probably going to be the most recommended banner for most champions, especially if they apply debuffs and things that need accuracy. And of course, let's not forget about the Great Hall, which has a huge boost to your accuracy as well. So there's plenty of sources. Now, when it comes to the absolute late game content, the Great Hall, the accuracy banner, maybe the little bit of extra accuracy that you get on your other stats probably still isn't quite going to be enough, so you might need to end up trying to get a little bit more. But generally speaking, you don't need to aim to try to get it like you do with certain stats like speed, crit rate, and crit damage. It's going to be a little bit less important in order to try to find, as I guess you could say, like a fetch stat on your gear. You're going to kind of come by a lot of the accuracy that you need without actually really having to look for it. And finally, that brings us with what is going to be the last stat, and that is going to be resist. Now, resist is definitely not absolutely awful or anything like that. It's just, generally speaking, there's too much of a priority on all the other stats that I've mentioned in this video in order to really try to go for resist. Now, defenses, I'm sure there are applications where, especially if you have a certain arena team and you really need it for some reason, there are going to be certain applications in certain unique circumstances where you might want to end up getting it. But generally speaking, across most champions and most situations in the game, you aren't going to want to be actively looking for resist. It is kind of a nice little bonus stat to end up finding here and there when it comes to your gear. Just like accuracy, you're probably going to end up with some resist on your gear somehow anyway, but it's definitely not something that you want to specifically be aiming for unless, like I said, it was one of those very rare circumstances where maybe you have a very unique skill composition or unique arena team where you are going to end up needing it. Now, the only other last little note that I wanted to mention is about gear sets and also about flat and percentage stats. Those of you guys who are more advanced probably know this, but very important when it comes to gearing up is you absolutely want to make sure that you prioritize percentage-based stats when you can over flat-based stats. They're going to scale with your champions at level 60, and they're going to scale with more rare champions much, much better. So overall, you're going to get a lot more stats on your gear when it comes to percentage-based stats than you are with flat-based stats. And when it comes to gear sets as well, I mentioned this in one of my other gearing videos, but I don't think I emphasized it enough. Gear sets are very, very nice and important in Raid Shadow Legends, but they are not an absolute must-have. If you have to sacrifice a gear set in order to get more stats from a specific piece of gear than that gear set is going to give you, it's absolutely going to be worth it. Let's just take a look at life set. The life set ends up giving you 15% life. Now, if you have a certain piece of gear that's going to break a life set, but you're going to get more than 15% life worth of stats by breaking your set and using that piece of gear instead, it's still absolutely worth going to be doing. Now, of course, if you can build around your sets, that is going to be free additional stats and bonuses that you can end up getting on your champions, but that doesn't mean that you should completely give up using amazing gear that you have just because it's going to end up breaking your set bonuses. So I thought that I would throw that in there as a little bit of a tip at the end. And with that all being said, I have thrown a lot of information at you guys in this video today, so I'm going to leave it here. Thank you everyone for watching. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and especially those of you guys who are newer, I'm hoping that you were able to learn at least a little bit from this video. If you guys did enjoy it and you want more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing to the channel for more, Really appreciate everyone. We are creeping really close to 20,000 subscribers, so thank you once again. If you guys want to help out and toss a quick like, it takes about a quarter of a second. Really do appreciate it, so thank you everyone. And of course, if you're interested in more Raid Shadow Legends videos, guides, tutorials, and all that fun stuff, there should be some more videos popping up on the screen right about now, so feel free to check them out. But if not, until next time, have a great day everyone, and this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.